Welcome to Seasons of Life, a biblical perspective for how to navigate life's ups and downs. Do you feel overwhelmed? Or do you feel successful? Experiencing loss? This weekly 15-minute word of inspiration will motivate you to live with more wisdom and peace. Here is your host, Pastor Mercy Oduah.
Welcome once again to another powerful episode of Seasons of Life. As you know, Seasons of Life is a biblical perspective for handling life challenges. My inspirational video aspires to empower and educate you with spiritual guidance and support as you go through the challenging seasons of life. I am sharing from my Seasons of Life experiences, hoping they will benefit you as you go through the ups and downs of life. If you are watching me for the first time, welcome. Please kindly subscribe and share this video so that we can become a community of support. Thank you so much. My last two episodes examine divine grace of God. I started a series on the divine grace of God, and we were able to see that the divine grace of God is God's life, strength, and righteousness given to us undeserved. Divine grace is not elegance, it's not the way you carry yourself, it's not the way you look. Rather, it is God's life, strength, and righteousness given to us undeserved. I also explore grace as God's existing covenant with anyone who believes. So, are you under the umbrella of grace? We were also able to see that grace differs from the covenant of law of the Old Testament, because while the law exposes us, it exposes us as sinners and did not help us, grace covers us with the holiness of God and empowers us to live above the domination of sin. That is good news. So today we are going to look at another dimension of grace, which is powerful. Yes, today we are going to look at grace application. Grace application. How do you apply grace in your life? I want you to know that not only are we saved by divine grace, but there is also an enabling power of grace. An enabling power of grace. It enables us with God's power. We find God's power in grace. So grace has an enabling power for you to apply in every areas of your life. Grace did not stop at salvation. There is a dimension of grace that you need to know and apply. And when you do, you are going to live victoriously. I want you to know that the enabling power of grace can be applied in three areas. The first one is in doing the will of God. The second one is in overcoming trials and tribulation. And the last one is in living under the grace of God not to sin. So in three areas, we can apply grace. First, grace can help you achieve the will of God. You have the will of God in your life and you don't know how to do it. Grace can help you achieve that will of God. Grace can help you overcome that thing that you're facing, that trials and tribulation. Grace is there to enable you to go through. And lastly, grace will help you not to live under the control, under the bondage of sin. So let us explore these areas in detail and see how to apply, because knowledge is power. And what you know, the truth you know, is the only thing that can set you free. So let's go. And the first one we're going to look at is how grace can help us achieve the will of God, because we all have something that God has called us to do. You see, because of the task ahead of us as parents, wives, husbands, children, spiritual leaders, businessmen, whatever it is, because of that task, sometimes we are overwhelmed. But we are not supposed to depend on our strength to accomplish the will of God in our lives. You are not supposed to depend on your strength to fulfill the will of God in your life. I like the quote by Benediction. And what did he say? He says that the will of God will never take you where the grace of God cannot sustain you. That is powerful. The will of God will not take you where the grace of God cannot protect you. Therefore, in trying to accomplish the will of God in our lives, we have the blessed assurance of the sustaining grace of God. In that thing that you're trying to accomplish, even to be a good parent, because that's the will of God, to parent our children, to go to school, to go to seminary, to go to regular school, to start a business, whatever adventure, whatever program, whatever thing that you think that God is calling you into, even into politics, even into anything at all, I want you to know, I want you to have the blessed assurance that as long as is the will of God, the grace of God is available for you to accomplish that task. So the only problem we encounter problem when we live outside the will of God, when we try to do things that are not in the will of God for us, or when we try to do the will of God by our own strength. That is when we have problem. That is when we feel overwhelming. I want you to know that even the Apostle Paul, he experienced so much enabling grace of God that he attributed his ministry accomplishments to the grace of God. We all know how much Apostle Paul suffered. So he attributed all his ministry accomplishment, which was the will of God for his life, he gave credit to the grace of God. And that was why he was able to testify to this enabling power. I am what I am by the grace of God. And that this grace of God is not in vain in me. Rather, with that grace of God, I labored above all the other apostles. Yet, it is not me, but the grace in me. That is the powerful quote in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10. I am what I am by the grace of God. Paul was able to fulfill the purpose of God in his life through the divine and enabling power of grace. The Bible reveals to us amazing men and women of God who accomplished the will of God for their life through the power of grace as well. So be encouraged today that whatever task or role that God has called you to play that is in His will, you will be able to accomplish it. Especially with parenting. We know that God blesses us with children, but most times parenting can be overwhelming. What do we do in such times? We reach out for the grace of God. We receive that grace of God. And we recognize that that grace is available. And that's when you apply it. So we have seen now how the grace of God can help us accomplish the will of God. So the second area we are going to examine is that the grace of God can help us overcome trials and tribulations of life. Yes, I want you to know that life is not without problems, even as Christians. But the good news is that God provides the necessary way. God provides the grace, His grace for us to go through those problems. He does not leave us powerless. There is a way of escape, and that is the way of grace. You are still here. That's what you tell yourself. Are you not? After all that you have been through, after the crisis of last year, after the crisis of 6 months ago, after the crisis of last month, that you think that was going to wipe you out, but you are still here standing. Why? Only through the enabling power of grace. Challenging and overwhelming health issues, financial problems, loss of loved ones, and abuse confront us every day. Does God know about our struggles? Yes, He does. Does He know about our abuse? Yes, He does. However, He has equally made a way for us. Remember that God warned us in the book of John, chapter 16, verse 33, by saying that we will have tribulations in the world. Yes, mainstream Christianity may present a trouble-free life, but biblical Christianity says otherwise. I repeat, mainstream Christianity may present to you a trouble-free life. But I want you to know that biblical Christianity says otherwise, because biblical Christianity recognizes trouble as part of life. The early Christians experienced much trouble in their own time. David was at war with his household. Yet the enabling power of grace prevailed for them. I can testify that without the enabling power of grace to deal with trials and tribulation, I would not have been able to handle the death of my son 4 years ago. Yes, I want you to know that my life experiences with pain and grief took me to the power of God's grace in dealing with pain and sorrow. I want you to know that I came in contact with the power of God's grace. So, whatever that you are facing, is it loss of someone? Is it trials? Is it temptation, tribulation of life? I want you to reach out to that power that is higher than you. I want you to fall to the loving arms of grace and stand on the rock guaranteed to hold your feet, and that is grace. Indeed, the enabling power of God's grace is sufficient for you according to 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9. And the last area that we want to look at is in the area of freedom from sin. Freedom from sin and bondage. Grace is not a license to sin, but power over sin control, according to Romans chapter 6, verse 14. Yes, living in sin is not living under grace. Living above sin is living under the power of grace. When you get a revelation of God's saving grace, you will know that you cannot go back to what God has delivered you from. Therefore, you reach out to God's enabling grace to overcome that sinful habit. We all have it. We all have areas of weakness. That is where grace comes in. Yes, you are a Christian. You have given your life to Christ. You find yourself dabbling in the same sin over and over. I want you to know that grace is available to overcome whatever it is: anger, malice, bitterness, pornography, stealing, jealousy, envy, whatever it is. Because you see, we are not perfect. We still have the sin nature in us. But the difference is that when you apply the grace of God in your area of weakness, you see victory in that area. Does it mean that you are perfect? No. Does it mean that you cannot sin again? No. It means that you are now free from the dominion, from the control of sin. Sin is no longer controlling you. You can break forth. You can say no. Yes, once in a while you can fall into sin, but it has no control over you. That is the difference. You are not deliberately engaging in a lifestyle of sin. That is not grace. So when you are struggling in that area, I want you to apply the book of Romans chapter 6 verse 14, which tells you that you have been free from the bondage of sin and you will experience victory in that area. I use myself for example. I used to be quick-tempered. And the more I read about grace and embrace the enabling power of grace, I experience victory in that area. Not that I don't get angry anymore. The difference is that my anger is now, my temper is under control. Because we are supposed to be under the control of any kind of sin. Occasionally we fall short, but we rise and we keep moving. We are not living in perpetual anger, perpetual bitterness, perpetual malice, perpetual stealing, and all those things. We are delivered, and the grace of God is there to help you overcome those sinful habits. So, as I close, we have seen that we can apply the grace of God in three areas. The first one, to do the will of God. The second one is to overcome trials and tribulations. And the third one is to be free from the control of sin. Next week will be something different because we are going to pray. We're going to pray as we are approaching Christmas. Grace is all over the air. I want us to understand and receive God's saving grace and God's enabling grace. We prayed to our lives and we prayed to you viewers. So may the Lord bless you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you. And may the Lord equip you with grace so that you can be able to live victoriously. Meditate on 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9. Shalom and see you next week.
Thank you for watching this episode of Seasons of Life. Until next time, be well and may God bless you.